Welcome everybody to another episode of WFA's Better Marketing Podcast, brought to you by our sponsors Meta, to whom great thanks. And the intent here is always to get somebody who will be of interest to our listeners. And I'm going to predict that I've got somebody to talk to today that goes beyond anybody we've ever had. It is the absolute legend that is Seth Godin. Okay, so welcome, Seth. What a privilege to have you join the WFA Better Marketing Podcast. Thanks so much for coming. I've seen you speak many a time. I've read some of your books and I'm an avid follower of your blog. So if there's one thing I've learned, the best thing I can do is just shut up and let you do the talking.
And I think that's unlikely, but I'm delighted to have the conversation.
One of the things, having watched you at work, that I think one of the things that we trade in marketing, which is massively undervalued, is the ability to observe patterns and weave stories and tell stories so they're compelling and engaging. And boy, can you do that. So when did you get this skill? When did you recognize it? Because obviously, it really is legendary. You are just so good at communicating and sharing things, and it's brilliant storytelling.
Well, you're very kind, but it's not part of marketing. That's all that marketing is, right? The hype and the hustle and the promo and the trips to Miami Beach to film commercials, those are just tactics. But marketing is about how are we going to tell a story that other people want to hear. And thank you for calling it a skill. It's not a talent. No one's born with it. And I started teaching in Canada when I was 17 years old. And what I found is if you want the attention of 12-year-olds who have a choice, it helps to put on a show. It helps to tell them a story that's about them, not about you. And I got focused on watching how people were responding. And one of the things that is a plus and a minus in the digital world is you can't look in people's eyes, but you have an enormous amount of data. And it's so easy to ignore what you're hearing about what's working and what's not. And one of the great benefits of speaking on stage is I can tell in 6 seconds if I've got the audience or if I don't. I can tell that when I go like this, something happens. And so I'll do that more. So it's been an evolutionary process, an intentional one of saying, how do I show up for other people, with other people, to help them get to where they're going?
Brilliant. And my most recent experience of that was watching you weave your magic in the WFA Global Marketer Week in Brussels. And what stuck in my mind there was the lessons you were teaching us marketeers were profoundly simple, actually based in the eternal truths of marketing, but in a way that I certainly was thinking, what do I do with this? How do I take this learning and apply it in today's corporate world? Because if I were an entrepreneur, I go, yep, I get that. I can go away and do this. But in big machines, how do you help them shift? I mean, I really did want to ask you that question because it's the lessons are so great, but how you apply them, I think.
It's funny, David, because the entrepreneurs in the room were saying, well, that works in big corporate America, but how do I put it to work in my entrepreneurial environment? Because it's very easy to imagine the grass is greener. Everyone in big companies is motivated by story. They use data to justify their story, but there's still a story they're telling themselves. And Western Union told themselves a story about what they did for a living. And that's why they turned down buying AT&T and made better telegrams instead. And when I was at Yahoo, the company told itself a story, which is why they didn't buy Google for $15 million. And as a marketer, you're not just telling a story to customers, you're telling a story to bosses, you're telling a story to the board, you're telling a story to the shareholders. One of the ways we influence that story is by figuring out which metrics we're going to highlight. What are we measuring? And that's the takeaway of the book Moneyball, is that what Michael Lewis highlighted is the baseball scouts were paying attention to one story, and Billy Bean pushed his scouts to pay attention to a different one. So what's the number that's on the whiteboard? What's the narrative that we're repeating over and over and over again? Right? What do they say at Ford Motor Company in the top 500 people that they're not saying at Toyota, that they're not saying at Renault? And if you can figure out how to persistently find the metric, tell the story, and bring the customer into the room, then things are going to shift. And that is what we see great leaders, regardless of job title, doing. They're bringing the story into the room, they're bringing the customer into the room, and then it's obvious what to do.
Wow. Again, profoundly simple, but on point. And I think if I also reflect on some of the stuff you were saying, obviously, as I prepared myself for this, I saw that you were the architect of what we called at the time permission marketing, and actually how ahead of the curve you were with that. Because if I look at what's the word I'm looking for? The shit that populates our scrolling experience, and what purports to be marketing, communication, advertising, and how much of it is just appalling. That notion that you had way back when, I mean, the turn of the decade, even turn of the century, permission marketing seems to me to have been one of those ideas ahead of its time. But we could do with rebirthing it, couldn't we? We could do with regaining the permission of people.
Yeah, I would have liked to have believed in 1994 when I started doing it that I could just explain it and be done. But I can't. And people need me to keep coming back and reminding them that attention is precious. It's not fungible. It is hard to regain. And if the system you're in is pushing you to spam folks and you're just saying, well, I'm just doing my job, it's just like you're stealing office supplies and computers and everything else from your company. You're stealing, making a shortcut when you steal attention, when you steal the benefit of the doubt. And it's not just spam from, people who want to give you a briefcase full of cash. It's every sort of pop up, pop under, pop around, every sort of fine print in your privacy statement where we're going around behind people's backs, manipulating them and taking advantage of their goodwill. That's not what great brands do. Great brands earn and protect permission. And we keep forgetting it because we justify it because the system pushes us to be in emergency mode. Well, emergency mode never goes away once you get into it. You have to figure out how to help your organization get out of emergency mode and do work you're proud of instead.
Wonderful. And actually in this, the notion of great brands that do it, can you do a few call outs here? Who do you think is doing this well? Who is respecting the data? And there's a kind of second part I'd like you to have in the back of your mind is, I'm fairly vocal about the platforms not helping this journey. And mindful, by the way, and thanks to you, Meta, for sponsoring this podcast and supporting us. But, them being respectful of this permission as well is a bit of the trading thing here. So great brands, platforms, perhaps I can ask you to talk on that.
I don't want you to lose any sponsors, so I will avoid ranting too long about social media networks. But what they have done is push people to work for them for free. That most of the businesses that are listening to this think that the work they're doing on social networks is normal and appropriate, but they're actually doing it to benefit the network, not to benefit themselves. And I don't work for Mark Zuckerberg as an unpaid intern, and you probably shouldn't either. And there are these platforms and tools, but you can use a billboard any way you want. Using a billboard in a way that makes the billboard company happy isn't necessarily why you should be doing it. When I think about businesses, as soon as I say a business is doing something great, they fall apart. But if I get an email from Patagonia, I'm going to open it because for 10 years, they've never once taken advantage of me. But let me use a small company as an example. There's a company called Askinosie. They were one of the first bean-to-bar chocolate makers in the world. And Sean does direct trade with farmers. He goes to Tanzania which is where he is right now, and meets the farmers every year and brings high school students with him as an educational process. So I'm reading every single day an email from Sean about his trip. That's permission. I would miss him if he were gone. If in the middle of the trip the email stopped coming, I would worry about him.
Yeah.
And so here we've got a giant multi-billion-dollar company, a small company with 40 employees, anybody in between, right? So I got an emergency email from somebody I knew at the New York Public Library, urgently asking me to pitch in $20 or $30 because they were having an emergency. Then I realized it wasn't someone I knew at the New York Public Library, that it was a form letter and that they send it all the time because they're just burning down their permission asset to make a couple hundred extra bucks. And I'm never going to open an email from the New York Public Library ever again. So what we have to do is not let scale get in the way. The fact is that if you were in a room with 4 potential customers, you would talk to them differently than if you were running an ad that was going to be seen by 400,000 potential customers, or you were sending a social media message that was going to be seen by 4 million potential customers. Why? Why is it that when we add more zeros, we care less? And the essence of what is possible here is simple. Just go back to 4. Just pretend there's only 4 potential customers in the whole world, and it's for them. If you do that, everything gets better.
And this, I think, then segues beautifully into, you are always bashing the drum for where is your strategy, and the confusion of tactics with strategy. And many people, when they're making a strategic presentation, are just wheeling a bunch of tactics. Can you drill into that a bit for us as well? Because I think strategy is the answer to most of this.
It's so easy to get hung up on tactics. Around the world, people are watching the Superman movie this week, and it's nothing but tactics. It's like, where should I punch right now? How do I win the next 10 seconds? Because it's an emergency. And when organizations get bigger, most of the people who work in the organization are charged with doing tactics, right? Your job is to go to Cannes and set up this cocktail party. That's a tactic. A strategy is a philosophy of becoming. It's the hard work we do before the hard work. Why are we here at all, right? So it's easy, for example, to look at luxury goods companies that have been around for hundreds of years. Their strategy is super simple. You'll pay a lot, but you'll get more than you pay for. And don't ask if our thing is better. Just understand that we're going to give you a badge you can wear that other people will think you earned. That's it. Everything they do, if it works, is a tactic to support that strategy. And you don't change your strategy for hundreds of years. Fine, right? Patagonia's strategy hasn't changed in decades. Apple's strategy hasn't changed in decades. The tactics keep changing. But most organizations, they don't have a strategy at all. They're just copying their competitors and trying to out-tactic them. And that's a race to the bottom. And one of the strategies that this industry is built on is in 1964. If you had the simple strategy of, we make average stuff for average people, but we advertise it like crazy, you were set for a 50-year run of happiness. You ran enough ads, you'd make enough money to run more ads. The end. And so the dark secret of Mad Men is Don Draper didn't run better ads. He just ran a lot of ads. And if he had a client who would let him run a lot of ads, they would do fine. That's it. End of story.
Yeah.
But what happened? What happened is the media technology landscape shifted. And these skilled, hardworking ad firms didn't get the memo. They still wanted to be what it was in the old days. It's not. And so we need a different set of tactics to support the bigger strategy that attention is valuable. But if your answer is, let's make a $5 million ad in Thailand, that's not the right answer anymore.
And I think in the uncertain times we're in now, and lots of tangents available, we won't take them, but let me just focus on Cannes for a minute. I wasn't there, but I read a lot about it. I looked at lots of the follow up. And one of the things I particularly liked was a PR guy that wrote a thing that said, listen, this is like being on the Titanic when everybody's having cocktails and having a party, but the ship is sinking. When are these people going to wake up? Which struck me as a remarkably compelling way of making the point. So, the ecosystem's in trouble, the whole thing is in trouble, and yet putting the truth on the table, on the whole, I grew up in a world of advertising. At the end of the 80s, the ITV ran a survey in their self-interest, of course, where people said, we like the ads more than the programs. And there were great ads. You'll remember that. Now, if you replicate the same thing, everybody hates ads. I mean, advertising executives have got themselves to be the lowest of the low in the food chain. I mean, how did that happen? Why are we still celebrating ineffective work? What's your kind of observation of Cannes? And I don't know whether you were there this year. I think not.
Never been.
Never been.
Never been. I just so admire the tactics and the polish and the commitment of people who have turned this industry from, the sponsor-read ads of the radio, just 1940 something, to these multi-million-dollar beautiful productions. You can't not love that level of professionalism. But again, it's how we get hung up on the tactics. It's not just the ad business. When they determined that ulcers were caused by bacteria, not by pastrami sandwiches, they proved it. And it took gastroenterologists 20 years to start acting differently. 20 years. When a doctor in Switzerland figured out that goiter could be cured by 1 drop of iodine, this was at a time when 20% of the people in Switzerland had goiter, which is a horrible, horrible disease. It took the medical establishment 20 years to start dealing differently. This is common because when we're good at something, professionals don't want the thing to change because they're good at it. And I work in the book publishing industry. It's dying even faster than the ad business. But most of the people in it think they'll be able to retire before it's all gone. And my point is, it's probably more fun and more thrilling to build the new thing than to defend the dying thing. And so what we have here is we have ad agencies who are filled with skilled and passionate storytellers, and they are trusted by their clients. Instead of waiting for the client to bring you average products and some money to put spin on it, why don't you go meet the engineering team and use your skill to get them to build something that doesn't need any ads? Because that is the future. The future is products that are the ads, not ads that we have to put on boring products.
Yeah, this is a bit, to the truth that the best marketing was always word of mouth. And this confusion that somehow or another influencers are the new word of mouth, I don't think so. Can you comment on that?
The influencer world is much, much smaller than most people who comment on it want to acknowledge. That, if someone's got 3 million followers on some social media platform, sounds like a lot. 3 million people in a stadium is an enormous number. But when that person shills for something, it might change the mind of 5,000 people, 10,000 people. That's still a lot of people in a stadium, but it's not a lot of people in terms of world market share. Television worked in my country because you could run an ad that would reach 70 million people reliably, straightforwardly. This is an ad. Influencers are never going to be that. They're a tiny little segment for cosmetics and for some other things. That's not going to change the world. But when we build a product that works better when your friends use it too, then the word spreads because it's built into the product itself is the engine for it to spread. And this is what is missing from so many companies where ad agencies could show up and change everything. How do we change the products to make them social products? How do we change the products to make them cultural products, not just commodities? Because what we're seeing is, particularly with 3D printing and AI and everything else, if you come up with a decent product, I can copy it in a week.
Yeah.
You don't have any installation anymore. But if you come up with a network effect, right? Like you and I could hire 10 engineers and build a clone of Facebook or a clone of Twitter in 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't work. And the reason it wouldn't work is no one else would be there.
Yeah.
People go because the others are there. And it's not just software. It's also how someone feels when they're wearing a Supreme t-shirt. A Supreme t-shirt doesn't cost $80 because it's got better cotton in it. It costs $80 because your friends are wearing it.
Yeah. And this network effect, and you described it before as finding your tribe as well. How do you see that? Because you really are driving for it's all about the product, it's all about the service that you deliver, and the rest of it is the network effect.
Okay, so a tribe is a group of people that don't belong to you. They belong to each other. But maybe you can narrate for them. Maybe you can connect them. The high school kids who hang out at the mall or by the movies, they're a tribe. They'll survive without you. But if you can figure out how to help them adopt you by you adopting them, when you become their avatar, now you are them. The empathy of marketing is what makes marketing work. And so, the people who invented legs pantyhose weren't women, they were men, but they had empathy for what a woman might need. That at Fisher Price, the toy company 300 miles from here, there are no 3-year-olds on staff, but they make toys for 3-year-olds because they have empathy for what a 3-year-old wants. And so what I'm getting at is when we narrate for the tribe, when we connect the tribe, when we give the tribe something that helps them get to where they want to go, our product is a souvenir of that. And if you have a brand, it's a brand because people are paying extra for it. Otherwise, it's a commodity. And if they're paying extra for it, it's because of the souvenir value.
And as you set about building a brand, I mean, I much like Sir John Hegarty's definition of a brand, which is a piece of real estate that you've got going here. And if I add to permission marketing to that, it's precious. When you've got somebody's attention and emotional engagement, it's a very precious thing. Does that work for you? Definition of brand?
Well, yeah, I think a brand is a promise. It's not a logo. It's a promise of what to expect. So I like to say that Hyatt has a logo, Nike has a brand. If Hyatt came out with a line of sneakers, we have no idea what it would be like. It would be comfortable, but that's it. But if Nike opened a hotel, we can all imagine what it would be like.
Yeah.
Because Nike makes a promise, a persistent, consistent promise over time. And it's broader than the specifics of the product. And most people who say they are doing a branding exercise are actually doing a logoing exercise. And I'll give you a small mental quiz here that ad people will appreciate. In your mind's eye, visualize a great logo. Everyone can do that. Okay, that logo you visualized, was it for a brand you like and respect? Because no one picks a swastika. No one. Even though by logo standards, it's pretty good, right? It's because we associate the imagery, the lines, the colors with the story of the brand. The logo doesn't matter. The Starbucks logo is absurd. If you pitch the Starbucks logo to any company today, they'd throw you out, right? But the Starbucks logo is great because it's related to Starbucks. So what is the promise, the expectation that we have for what you're doing? And if you're not paying for that in the early days, you're not really building much.
And how do you talk a lot about being systematic about storytelling, building systems to support this way of thinking. I mean, how do you see that working at the moment? I mean, I'm going to guess you help people do that. And when you look at structures get in the way of this sometimes. The way companies are set up, they're set up to fail.
Right. So my friend Bernadette Jiwa has written 6 best-selling books about story. So she is the expert. But what I will say about systems is this. Systems are like gravity. They're invisible and they make things normal. We don't notice that the earth sucks. We just notice that we can walk across the room. there are systems at work. Who sits where at the table? How long do meetings last? What does a pitch look like? How do we argue with people to get things to be better? All of these invisible systems are taken for granted until you show up at a different company where they have different systems. And so, Charles Revson was famous for going to press okays and torturing the guys at the print shop to get the skin tone exactly the way he wanted to. Well, part of the reason he did that was to tell a story about the systems there, about what he thought was going to be important. So when we think about story, when we think about how do decisions get made, what are things like around here, we can build new systems that will lead to a different kind of storytelling, right? So how do you decide if the new website is good, right? Do you decide it's good because the brother-in-law of the CEO needed and they worked really hard on it, or is it because we focus grouped it with 6 random strangers, or what, right? We get what we measure. We get what we say is important. And if you say story is important, but you don't do anything about it, if you're at a rent-a-car company and you say brand is important, but you also have a huge division that does nothing but rip people off with nickels and dimes as often as you can, you're not actually saying that brand is important. And so I'll give you one of my favorite examples. There was a company in the U.S. called Kinko's, and Paul Orfalia, who was a friend of mine years ago, sold it to FedEx for billions of dollars. And Kinko's was a copy shop, started in a college campus. And Paul proudly had severe dyslexia, almost illiterate. And to build this company, all he did was visit stores, walk in and say, what's working? And he would take notes. And then he would tell the other stores about what innovations had happened at that store. And if he walked into your Kinko store and you couldn't answer his question, you were in trouble. That simple act by the CEO of spending a few hours every single day doing that changed the system that enabled Kinko's to grow from a commodity, we make copies, to a company that was worth billions of dollars. So we get to figure out what questions we're asking to people. We get to figure out how we're measuring this brand. And if you're marketing driven, it means the marketing department is in charge. But if you're market driven, it means the market is in charge. You get what you measure.
And back to platforms for a minute, because some of the metrics they offer up haven't helped make any of this any better, just to say it like that. I mean, if you are sitting inside a company at the moment, what's the metric set that you would say, so I'm CEO of a business I'm starting, what metric set should I use, Seth?
Well, the first thing I would do is give you a roll of tape, and we would put the tape over the parts of your screen that show you the metrics that are important to the social media networks. Like, don't tell me how many followers you added. I don't care. Don't tell me how many people saw your TikTok video. I don't care. There's zero correlation between how many people see a TikTok video and how many items you're selling. Don't brag about the fact that during the Super Bowl, Oreos did a tweet that was seen by 20 million people. It didn't sell one extra Oreo. It did nothing to help the cookies, right? So let's be very clear about what we are going to measure. So when I was building what became email marketing, we would send out emails and we had an 82% open rate and a 34% response rate to our emails. And by today's standards, that's insane. That's up by a factor of 500 compared to what people get today. Well, because that's what we were measuring. We were obsessed with making those numbers go up. And if we did something and those numbers didn't go up, we didn't do it anymore. And so when we're very clear about what is a proxy for where we're going to go and how we're going to get there, your team will make that number go up. But be very clear about what that number is, because if you're measuring short-term things, you're going to get short-term results.
Yeah, and again, all the data available to anybody is, great businesses are built by balancing the short and the long term. And, if you get that balance right, you're golden. You're always going to have this. I mean, and these are easy things to say with our lack of hair. Let's put it like that, because we've seen all of this for many a year. But
Yeah.
Just as we come to the close here, I mean, I guess our grandparents would have said they lived in uncertain times. So I'm kind of cautious to go, times are more uncertain now than they ever were before, because I think that's change is the constant here. But we did some research, the WFA, with CMOs on the way into Cannes, and actually you can see the pain of the uncertainty is really strong. I mean, what's the advice you got for our community in these times, Seth?
Well, as you said, David, the world is crazy. It's upside down. It's filled with chaos. And this today is as stable as the world is ever going to be again. And what that means, and I think it's impossible to argue with that, what that means is you're either going to build a business that thrives on chaos or that fights for things to go back to normal. And if you build the first kind of business, one where tumult is actually something you are expecting, you will always outperform people who are just fighting for things to go back to normal.
Wow, fabulous. And because I've always ended these podcasts with the same question, I probably need to break that habit, but I'm going to do it nevertheless.
Don't break it. Good habit.
Yeah. What is what should a marketeer have at the top of their agenda at the moment? What's the one thing you would get everybody to remember, put on their to-do list?
When you pick your customers, you pick your future. And by that, I mean a few things. Pick your boss, pick your clients, pick the people you seek to serve. Because if you are trying to chase people who are selfish, short-term, bottom fishers, then that's what you're going to have to do. If you are any good at what you do, you're going to fire your worst clients. You're going to walk away from your worst customers. If you're not prepared to do that, then I don't think you're serious about being a great marketer.
Well, what a wonderful note to end on. And listen, absolute privilege to spend time talking to you. Thank you very much, because I know how precious your time is. Thoroughly enjoyable session, Seth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Keep making this ruckus. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What a wonderful conversation with Seth Godin. Tough act to follow, but he's going to be followed by the wonderful CMO of the Magnum ice cream company, Lael Eskin. Lael, as you know, has overseen an extraordinary growth in Magnum, and it's a business that is about to be spun off from Unilever. So looking forward to that session, and looking forward to seeing you all again soon on a WFA Better Marketing Podcast. Meanwhile, take the very best of care.